The projector whirred in the darkness, the sound like a rhythmic heartbeat echoing through the crowded ballroom. On the screen, Mara was smiling, raising a glass of champagne to her investors. It was supposed to be the launch of her global brand. It was supposed to be her coronation. But then, the film strip flickered. A jagged line cut across her smiling face. The audio shifted from classical music to a grainy, whispered conversation recorded inside a car 3 months ago. Mara dropped her glass. The crystal shattered on the marble floor, the sound sharp as a gunshot. Silas stood at the back of the room, his hand on the projector switch. He didn't say a word. He didn't have to. He just watched as her empire turned to dust in 4K resolution. But to understand why a man who loved his wife more than life itself would systematically dismantle her entire existence in front of 200 people, we have to go back to the first snowfall of December. Silas was a man of patience. As a restoration expert for antique machinery, he spent his days breathing life back into things that the world had discarded. He understood gears, springs, and the delicate balance of tension. He knew that if you rushed a repair, you broke the mechanism. He lived in a sprawling, glass-walled house overlooking the frozen lake, a property he had bought with the money from selling his first patent. It was a cold house, made colder by the distance growing between him and Mara. Mara was vibrant, electric, and perpetually dissatisfied. She was launching a luxury lifestyle brand, funded entirely by Silas's savings. She called it Ascension. Silas called it a bottomless pit. It started on a Tuesday evening. The air outside was biting, the kind of cold that freezes the breath in your lungs before you can exhale. Silas was in his workshop, polishing the lens of a 1,950-second cinema projector he had bought at an estate sale. He heard the crunch of tires on the gravel driveway. Through the workshop window, he saw Mara's car, but she wasn't alone. Now, most people would react immediately. They would storm out, scream, demand answers. That is the human instinct. But Silas? Silas was not like most people. He was a creature of observation. And that trait, right there, is what makes this story different. He watched as a man stepped out of the passenger side. It was Julian, their financial advisor, the man Silas trusted with his life's work. Julian didn't just walk Mara to the door. He pulled her close, kissing her with a familiarity that spoke of months, maybe years, of hidden intimacy. Mara laughed, a sound Silas hadn't heard directed at him in a decade, and handed Julian a thick manila envelope. Silas didn't move. He didn't blink. He felt a coldness spread through his chest, colder than the winter air outside. It wasn't rage, it was clarity. He looked down at the projector lens in his hands. It magnified everything. It showed the cracks, the dust, the imperfections. He realized in that silent workshop that his marriage was just like the machines he fixed, broken, rusted, beyond repair. He put the lens down gently. He picked up his phone. He didn't call a lawyer. Not yet. He opened the app that controlled the home security system. "Record," he whispered to the empty room. The weeks that followed were a masterclass in psychological warfare. Silas adopted the persona of the silent witness. He became a ghost in his own marriage. He cooked dinner. He asked about her day. He listened as she lied about late meetings and supplier issues. He watched her eyes when she told him she loved him. They were dead eyes, flat and rehearsed. One evening, during a blizzard that trapped them inside, Mara sat by the fire, scrolling through her phone. "Silas," she said, not looking up, "I need another 50,000 for the launch venue. The investors are hesitant. We need to show strength." Silas was oiling the gears of the projector on the coffee table, the smell of machine oil mixed with her expensive perfume. 50,000, he repeated, his voice level. That's the last of the liquidity, Mara. If the launch fails, we lose the house. It won't fail, she snapped, finally looking at him. Her face was twisted with contempt. You have no vision, Silas. You play with old toys while I'm trying to build a future. Just sign the check. This is the moment where the antagonist reveals their true nature. Not the betrayal of the body, but the betrayal of the spirit. She didn't just cheat on him. She despised him. And she was using his own resources to build a life with the man she was cheating with. It's a level of audacity that demands a response. Silas stood up. He walked to the desk, wrote the check, and handed it to her. Make it count, he said. Mara snatched the check, a triumphant smirk playing on her lips. She didn't notice that Silas hadn't signed his usual signature. He had signed it with a slightly different curvature, a subtle signal to his bank to flag the transaction for review in exactly 30 days. 30 days. That was the timeline. The investigation phase was methodical. Silas knew that digital evidence could be deleted, but physical evidence was eternal. He found the second phone taped under the drawer of her vanity. He didn't unlock it. He simply cloned the SIM card while she was in the shower. He found the bank statements hidden in the spare tire well of her car. Transfers to an account in the Cayman Islands under Julian's name. They weren't just having an affair. They were embezzling him. They were siphoning his wealth to start a new life together once Ascension launched. But the centerpiece of his evidence came from the house itself. Silas had installed new motion sensors for the security system. Mara thought they were for burglars. In reality, they were high-fidelity audio recorders. He captured everything. He heard them mocking him in his own kitchen. He's so pathetic, Julian's voice sneered on the recording. He just hands over the money. He thinks you're a genius. He's a useful idiot, Mara replied, the sound of a wine cork popping in the background. Once the launch is over and the IPO hits, I'll file for divorce. I'll take half of what's left, and we'll be in Tuscany by spring. Silas listened to these tapes in his workshop, wearing noise-canceling headphones. He didn't cry. He didn't throw things. He simply spliced the audio. He cleaned the tracks. He synced them to the visual timeline he was building. He was editing the final movie of their marriage. 2 weeks before the launch, the atmosphere in the house shifted. Mara became manic, obsessed with the details of the party. It has to be perfect, Silas, she said, pacing the living room. The venue, the lighting, the projection. I want a massive screen. I want to show the journey of Ascension, a montage of my hard work. Silas looked up from his book. I can handle the projection, he offered. I have that vintage cinema projector. I've retrofitted it with a digital core. It produces a picture quality no modern machine can match. It would be cinematic. Mara waved her hand dismissively. Fine, whatever. Just make sure it works. Julian will be giving the keynote speech. I want him to look good. I'll make sure everyone sees the real Julian, Silas promised. The trap was set. The irony here is delicious. She is asking the man she is destroying to build the stage for her victory. She is so blinded by her arrogance that she hands him the weapon he will use to execute her. It is the classic hubris of the villain. The day of the launch arrived. It was a black-tie gala at the city's most exclusive hotel. The room was filled with the city's elite, potential investors, and press. Silas wore a tuxedo that fit him perfectly. He moved through the crowd, accepting polite nods. He was the husband, the accessory, the wallet. He saw Julian near the bar, looking dapper and smug. Julian raised a glass to Silas, a mock salute. Silas nodded back. "Enjoy the night, Julian," Silas said softly. "It's a once-in-a-lifetime event." The lights dimmed. The room went silent. A spotlight hit the stage where Mara stood, looking radiant in a silver gown that cost more than Silas's first car. "Welcome," she purred into the microphone. "Tonight is about vision. It's about seeing the future before it happens. It's about transparency and truth. I built Ascension from nothing but integrity." The crowd applauded. Silas, standing in the projection booth high above the ballroom, felt a cold smile touch his lips. "Transparency," he whispered. "Let's give them transparency." He flipped the switch on the vintage projector. The heavy reels began to spin. The beam of light cut through the darkness, hitting the massive screen behind Mara. It started with the official corporate video. Inspirational music, stock footage of mountains and eagles. The crowd watched politely. Mara smiled, basking in the glow. Then, the glitch. The screen turned static gray. The audio hissed, and then the car interior appeared. It was dashcam footage from Mara's car. Silas had recovered it from the SD card she thought she had wiped. The angle was wide. It showed Mara and Julian in the front seat. They were parked overlooking the city. "How long until we can dump him?" Julian asked on the giant screen. His voice boomed through the ballroom speakers, crisp and clear. On stage, Mara froze. She turned around, confusing spreading across her face. She thought it was a technical error. "Soon," the on-screen Mara replied. "I just need him to sign over the patent rights for the prototype. Then he's useless. We take the money, bankrupt the LLC, and leave him with the debt." The ballroom gasped, a collective intake of breath that sucked the oxygen out of the room. "Turn it off," Mara screamed, her voice shrill. "Cut the power." But Silas had bypassed the hotel's main system. The projector ran on an independent battery source. He had locked the booth door. The video cut to the kitchen security footage. "He's so boring, Julian. It's like living with a statue. I can't wait to spend his money with someone who actually has a pulse." Julian, standing by the bar, turned pale. He started to back away towards the exit, but the crowd had formed a semicircle, blocking him. They weren't just attendees anymore. They were the jury. The video continued. Bank statements flashed on the screen, highlighted in red. Embezzlement, fraud, signatures forged. Then, the final clip. It was from the night of the blizzard. Mara looking into the camera, unaware. "I never loved him. He was just a stepping stone." This is the nuclear payoff. Notice how we didn't just expose the cheating. Cheating is a domestic issue. We exposed the crime, the fraud, the malicious intent. By showing the financial betrayal, we turned the audience from awkward bystanders into witnesses of a felony. We raised the stakes from heartbreak to prison time. The screen went black. The only light in the room came from the projector beam, now shining on an empty white canvas. Silas leaned into the booth's microphone. His voice was calm, godlike from above. "The police are waiting in the lobby, Julian. They have the originals of everything you just saw. And Mara, the checks you signed, I canceled them 30 days ago. You don't own Ascension. You don't own the house. You don't even own the dress you're wearing. I kept the receipts." Mara collapsed to her knees on stage, a silver ruin in the spotlight. The flash of press cameras began to pop, capturing her destruction frame by frame. 6 months later, Silas stood on the deck of his lake house. The winter had passed, and the ice was melting. The air smelled of pine and wet earth. The divorce had been swift. The evidence was irrefutable. Mara was facing 3 years for fraud. Julian had turned state's witness against her to save himself, betraying her just as they had betrayed Silas. A poetic cycle of treachery. Silas walked back into his workshop. The vintage projector sat on his workbench. He ran his hand over the cold metal casing. It had done its job. He picked up a screwdriver. He didn't need to fix it anymore. He needed to build something new. He was alone, yes. But for the first time in years, the silence in the house wasn't empty. It was peaceful. He looked at the camera, breaking the fourth wall for the first time. They say revenge is a dish best served cold, he mused. But justice? Justice is best served in high definition. And that leaves us with a question. Silas destroyed Mara publicly. He humiliated her, stripped her of her wealth, and sent her to prison. Was this justice, or was it cruelty? If you held the evidence that could ruin someone who betrayed you, would you burn it, or would you press play? Tell me in the comments below.